done for them that have been net 60. There's like no reason why this one wouldn't be. And then just using like HITRUST, and then that way, if like he gives you problems or whatever, Mike can kind of handle it. It shouldn't be a problem. Okay, cool. Thanks. Bye. So serious? Yeah, I'll get into that.
Hi, Alex. If you can hear this, I think some of our callers are able to speak. If you could just limit it to my connection as the presenter. Successful certification. On our agenda today, we'll have a brief introduction to Tevora, as well as myself, the presenter. We'll give a brief HITRUST overview. We'll talk about why organizations are seeking HITRUST certification. We'll talk about how HITRUST is different from some of the other compliance frameworks. We'll also talk about the assessment structure, as well as keys to successful certification. Tevora is an originally approved HITRUST assessor and is also full information security and compliance service offering. So we have a healthcare group, which I lead as the managing director. However, we also have a PCI practice, an ISO practice, a pen testing group, et cetera, et cetera. We really provide a full suite of security and compliance service offerings. My name is John Huckabee. As I mentioned, I'm the managing director of our healthcare information security and compliance practice. I have 17 years of information security and compliance experience. A little bit about HITRUST. HITRUST was founded in 2007. It's headquartered in Frisco, Texas. And most importantly, it's the only universally recognized healthcare information security certification. It is governed by a board of directors and made up from leaders throughout the healthcare industry. So why are organizations seeking HITRUST certification? Well, I would say the majority of the clients that we work with, they're being required to be certified as a result of just the cost of doing business. So a group such as a United Healthcare or Athena, for example, they're requiring all of their business associates to become certified. So that's one category. It's that category of companies where they're being required to do it by a business counterpart. The second category is those organizations that are simply just looking for a comprehensive control framework to help better secure their environment. We'll get into what comprehensive means and why HITRUST is comprehensive, but it's not uncommon for us to work with organizations that are just looking to better secure their environment. And then lastly, a lot of the organizations we work with, and this is really particular in the technology service provider space, they're really looking to have that HITRUST stamp of approval be a marketplace differentiator for their product or their service. So if they want to help out their sales group, their salespersons can then say, hey, we're HITRUST certified, you can trust our product. Or hey, our organization is HITRUST certified, you can trust our service. Those are the three major categories or reasons why organizations are seeking HITRUST certification. So HITRUST is a very different framework when compared to some of the other frameworks out there, such as the PCI Data Security Standard or any of the SOC suite under the AICPA, for example. And we'll walk through some of those differences on this slide. The first major difference is that the entire certification process is managed in an online web application called MyCSF. So all the assessments are performed in that application. The QA process goes through that application. A lot of the interactions and the mechanics of achieving and maintaining the certification are done in that online or performed in that online web application. Another difference is that, unlike other compliance frameworks, the HITRUST framework requires that organizations perform a self-assessment prior to becoming certified or performing the validated assessment or the certification audit. So it's really a two-step process. There's a self-assessment process and then the certification, or what HITRUST calls the validated assessment step. The second difference is that HITRUST has a separate fee from the assessor fee. So if you were to contract with Tevora to perform your HITRUST certification audit, you would also need to pay a subscription fee to HITRUST. So just something to be aware of when you're budgeting for a first-time HITRUST certification. The next difference we wanted to point out is that HITRUST audits the auditor, so that would be Tevora, the assessor, on 100% of its assessments. There are no shortcuts. So again, unlike other compliance frameworks where the final reports or the evidence might be spot checked on a biannual basis, Tevora actually, HITRUST actually audits 100% of the certification assessment. So just something to keep in mind when you're choosing assessors, because quality does matter. HITRUST is a very unique scoring methodology and approach for its assessments, and we'll get into some of the details of that in future slides. And then lastly, the control set is unique to each organization. So again, unlike other compliance frameworks that have a stagnant set of requirements that are applied to all companies or organizations, HITRUST actually customizes its requirements to fit your organization. So those are some of the key differences when you think of HITRUST, and if you have perhaps experience with other frameworks, you can think about how those frameworks would differ from the HITRUST framework. So the HITRUST requirements are organized in a very distinct way. There are 19 HITRUST domains in the HITRUST framework. Each of those domains has multiple requirements that are individually scored. So all assessments have 19 domains. On average, I would say that our assessments have about 350 requirements. So those 350 requirements are spread out amongst those 19 domains. To become certified, each domain is required to have a score of 62%. Each requirement is scored against 5 different maturity categories, and we'll go over that in a future slide. And the number of requirements, as I mentioned earlier, can vary greatly from organization to organization. So we have one organization now that has over 800 requirements among those 19 domains. We have another organization that only has 290 requirements among those same 19 security domains. So really, it's very customized to each of the companies we work with, and there are a slew of factors that determine those requirements. So I mentioned that each of the requirements is scored by what HITRUST calls 5 maturity categories. Those categories are policy, which is worth 25% of the score. Process or procedure is also worth 25% of the score. Whether or not the control is implemented and is operating effectively is 25% of the score. And whether or not an organization is measuring the outcomes of that control's effectiveness is 15% of the score. And whether you're managing against those measurements is worth 10% of the score. What Tevora typically advises our clients is to really concentrate on those first 3 maturity categories. Year 1, policy, process, and implemented. Obviously, some simple math tells you you can score 75% on a requirement. And if you were to score 75% on all requirements within a domain, you would have a domain score of 75%, and you would easily be certifiable just under that domain. So really focusing on those first 3 categories, policy, procedure, and implemented, is enough to get certified. Measured and managed is, you can look at it as going above and beyond what is required for certification, but certainly as your security environment matures, you may include some activities within your organization to achieve scores in those categories. And then just a reminder in the footnote on this slide that for certification purposes, we are more concerned with domain scores than we are with individual requirement scores. Don't get lost in the weeds. So remember the key focus of certification, a minimum score of 62% for each of those 19 domains. That's what you're really striving for. You don't want to get too caught up in trying to knock each individual requirement out of the park. Really focus on those domain scores. And I've spoken previously to those domains, and here are the 19 HITRUST domains. Information Protection Program, Vulnerability Management, Education, Training, and Awareness, Endpoint Protection, Network Protection, Third-Party Assurance, Portable Media Security, Transmission Protection, Incident Management, Mobile Device Security, Password Management, Business Continuity and Disaster Recovery, Wireless Security, Access Control, Risk Management, Configuration Management, Audit Logging and Monitoring, Physical and Environmental Security, Data Protection and Privacy. So those are basically 19 categories that most folks that have compliance security experience will be familiar with each of those 19 categories. Just a little bit of a side on those categories. Newer, less mature security organizations tend to struggle with third-party assurance, and even larger organizations actually tend to struggle with the third-party assurance domain. HITRUST really takes it to the next level with respect to its third-party assurance requirements. And then newer organizations struggle with the audit logging and monitoring domain. They may not have a SIM tool such as a Splunk or a Logarithm, for example, or any of the open source tools implemented as a logging solution. So just a couple of domains to be mindful of as you begin your HITRUST odyssey. So let's talk about the keys to a successful certification. First piece of advice, and the most important piece of advice, is use an experienced HITRUST assessor. There is no requirement with the level of experience that an individual has, other than they need to go attend the assessor training in Frisco, Texas, and have a couple of years of security experience. But you really need experience working with HITRUST to become an effective assessor. And you really would like to choose an organization such as Tevora that has been performing assessments and that has been certifying organizations for years, because organizations such as that know which pitfalls are out there and how to avoid them. So really, there are a lot of pitfalls when it comes to seeking HITRUST certification, and using an experienced assessor can really help your company avoid those pitfalls. The second piece of advice, be aware of HITRUST version update timelines and control population variations. HITRUST updates its control library on a biannual basis, once in the fall and once in the beginning of the year. And so just be aware that your requirement set can be modified or updated. So requirements may be removed and new requirements may be added on a biannual basis. So understand when you purchase products from HITRUST the implications of those updates, and an experienced assessor or even HITRUST can help you understand those ramifications. But just something to be aware of, that HITRUST is continually updating its control library. Third piece of advice, get your requirement set established accurately and as soon as possible. A lot of inexperienced assessors or organizations think they know what their requirements are, and then an experienced assessor comes in and notices perhaps some scoping errors or some answers that were incorrectly answered during the setup of the assessment. So make sure you get that requirement set established accurately and, of course, as soon as possible, so your organization has an ample amount of time to address the requirements. Fourth piece of advice, purchase the annual MyCSF subscription. That would be something you would purchase from the HITRUST Alliance themselves. By having the subscription, it enables your organization to have year-round access to the HITRUST online web application, which really is just an ease of use and provides a level of comfort. Some of the other products that HITRUST provides, they have an expiration date, a 90-day expiration, and it's not uncommon for us to see organizations hit that expiration point, and then they're required to repurchase another object from the HITRUST Alliance. So our recommendation, purchase the subscription if you can find it in your budget. Next is really kind of a project management tip, which is HITRUST has a series of requirements, anywhere ranging from 300 to 800 requirements for a certification. With that many requirements, assigning requirement owners is really project management 101 for HITRUST. Make sure that you're assigning requirement owners to each of the individual requirements, particularly for larger organizations. Smaller organizations or startups may only have 2 or 3 requirement owners, but for larger organizations, assigning requirement owners is a pivotal factor in achieving HITRUST success. As I mentioned earlier, policies and procedures are worth 50% of any domain's score. So documenting all of your policies and procedures is just a really easy way to get really close to that certification requirement of 62% for each of the domains. Next, we suggest that organizations establish a strategy by domain. Because HITRUST does not require organizations to effectively implement all of the requirements, that means that organizations can pass on some of the requirements, especially those that are more onerous or more difficult, or that simply just don't make sense for an organization. So keep in mind that the scoring is flexible, and you can have a domain strategy, meaning you can pick and choose the requirements that make the most sense for your organization. Next, you want to keep your requirements set limited to the minimum possible for your organization's first HITRUST assessment. HITRUST can be a heavy lift for many organizations that do not have mature security and compliance frameworks already implemented. And HITRUST does give organizations the ability to add extra requirements that aren't necessary for the certification. So for example, an organization may choose to add PCI requirements to its HITRUST certification process. Well, that doesn't really make sense because HITRUST requirements are not required for HITRUST certification. They're required for PCI, but they're not required for HITRUST. So keep your requirement set limited to the minimum possible. And then lastly, use experienced organizations such as Tevora to both help prepare your organization and to certify your organization. And we're going to talk a little bit about what Tevora does, perhaps a little differently than some of the other assessor organizations out there, what we believe makes us different from many of the assessor organizations out there. So first, Tevora provides policy templates and procedure examples for a nominal fee. So HITRUST, as we mentioned earlier, requires a written policy and procedure essentially for each of the requirements within the framework. That's a lot of work to just start from scratch on. We have a comprehensive set of policies and procedure examples that we give nearly free of charge to the organizations that choose us as their assessor. And we do that because we know that that's a critical factor in achieving success. Those policies do need some customizations. Of course, the procedure needs some customization, but just having those templates up front, we've seen as a huge advantage for organizations that leverage those. Other assessor firms might provide those, but they charge a pretty hefty fee for those. It just takes the Tevora team a couple of hours to customize those to your environment and to provide those to you. So just a really nominal fee, and it's a great first step towards remediation. The other thing that Tevora provides is strategic remediation. Because of our level of experience, we're able to identify, hey, you can pass on this requirement, or hey, you're really going to need to implement this solution or this process to achieve the appropriate score for this domain. Having a strategic advisor and having a strategic remediation plan will go a long way towards HITRUST certification success. HITRUST also provides Tevora provides an executive summary during the gap assessment or the self-assessment phase that is board and C-suite level ready. That is something that we've honed over several years. We found many of our clients were asking, hey, our CEO, our board of directors, they want to know a status of HITRUST. They want to know what we're doing with HITRUST. So we provide that presentation as part of our package, and it's been very well received from our clientele. Tevora is a solution provider. So what that means is we have a solutions team that implements security tools. It's certainly not something that is mandated by HITRUST unless it's needed to meet certain requirements, but it does give Tevora the hands-on experience if your organization needs recommendations with selecting specific tools. For example, we can help provide guidance on best of breed, what makes sense at your price points, what are some of the cheaper, more free solutions out there. That's all experience that Tevora has in-house that some of the other assessor firms simply don't have. Tevora, as I mentioned earlier, is a complete security and compliance consulting firm. What I mean by complete is we provide a full suite of security solutions and services. Most importantly, I think our customer satisfaction is off the charts. We have 100% customer satisfaction with our HITRUST clients. We have certified 100% of our HITRUST clients that have sought certification. And that is something that almost all other assessor organizations cannot say. And we're very proud of that. And it's something that, we say that with as much humility as possible, but it's really because of that next point, which is we value our relationships. We really want to see our customers be successful. We interact with our clients year round. We perform roundtables. We have events to get like-minded security professionals together. We do what we can to just stay interactive and to keep an interaction with our clients. And I think that that's been a huge part of our success in our HITRUST group as well. And then, of course, experience as one of the original assessor firms and as one of the leading assessor firms by volume, we bring the level of experience that it takes. And that differentiates us from some of the other assessor firms that are kind of doing HITRUST as a one-off. My team within our healthcare division does HITRUST every day, every week of the year. That's all that we do. So we're really experts at HITRUST. That doesn't mean that we can't speak to other compliance frameworks, because we can. I myself am a former QSA. Other members of my team are as well. So we have a lot of that cross-functional experience as well. We also have other teams that specialize in those other frameworks as well that we work closely with. But really, at the end of the day, working with HITRUST day in and day out gives us an edge over the competition. And that's it. That's a brief introduction to HITRUST and some of the keys to successful certification. Mark Sabelli is our key point of contact for our healthcare sales. Here you see his contact number. Both of us are on LinkedIn as well. Feel free to send an email to myself or Mark, or reach out to Mark directly on the phone, and we'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have for Tevora and get your company started down the HITRUST path. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and have a great rest of the week.